everybody, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we have an absolutely brilliant presentation by esteemed astrologer Kathy Rose titled Midpoint Pictures in Natal Analysis. As a reminder, our spring term semester is open for registration. We have classes from beginner to intermediate to advanced, from our full diploma program to certificate programs, and also individual classes you may wish to take to add to your astrological toolbox. If you'd like to learn more, please visit KeplerCollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
So welcome to the Midpoint lecture. I have to say, I'm really happy to be presenting this topic to you, but this is a massive topic. And I teach a lot, and I have to say that I really struggled putting this presentation together simply because to try to determine what are the basics, what do I want to present, and what do I want to cut was really challenging. So I'm going to be talking rather quickly today. Fortunately, we have this recording, so if at any point I go a little too fast, please go back, watch the recording, and take your time to digest what I've said. I apologize in advance if I go through it so speedy fast, but I want to cover everything. And even so, even though I cut a lot, it still may be right around 90 minutes. So I want you to remember to breathe, and I may be mentioning everybody take a deep breath at some point, and that's going to be for my benefit also. All right, so please take a look at the image on the screen, and this is depicting a midpoint. It's with these rocks, but the rock that's in the middle would be the midpoint between the two rocks. I loved that. I was very pleased to find this image. Let's dive in and talk about this very important topic. First of all, just as an overview statement, when you add midpoint pictures to your natal analysis, you get the opportunity to have some extra nuance, and it adds complexity into the synthesis. And it can help you to flesh out some of the life purpose themes, also to fine-tune the vocational profile. One of the things I do as a modern therapeutic astrologer is I look at the horoscope from a life purpose point of view. So I'm trying to determine, what is this soul trying to learn or grow or polish in this lifetime? And sometimes taking the midpoints into consideration helps me flesh that out. Usually the themes are obvious, but when there are multiple themes showing up right off the bat, midpoints can be extremely helpful. And I'm going to cover all that. So in this presentation, you're going to learn the definition of astrological midpoints. We are going to be looking at the 90-degree midpoint sort and just what an amazing tool that can be. I'm going to share some efficient midpoint notation styles because I am a big fan of making your notation style consistent. It will speed up your brain because your brain gets used to it. And then I'm going to share some of the most important and essential midpoint pictures. So we have a lot to cover. So let's start with, what is a midpoint? Well, it is the ultra-sensitive middle ground between two planets or a planet and an angle. And you see the image on screen says halfway. So it's a halfway point. The midpoint between two symbols invites the connection of those two symbols, two planets or a planet and an angle, whether they are in aspect or not. So it allows you to start blending some planets that may not be connected by aspect. Midpoints are most powerful when they are part of a midpoint picture, and that's what we're going to talk about next. A midpoint picture is when there is a natal planet occupying the same degree and mode in the 90-degree sort. And it's going to take me a few slides before I show you the 90-degree midpoint sort. Hang in there. I need to cover some basics first. But midpoint pictures are amazing. They are wonderful to start working with, because when a natal planet or angle occupies the same degree and mode as a midpoint, it relates those three astrological symbols together, and it creates a conduit by which those two planets in the midpoint are invited to interact. And this is what you can easily see instantly in a 90-degree midpoint sort. Okay, let me show you a chart and just show you some midpoint pictures in a chart form. And it is so important to understand now we are going to be compounding synthesis, because we're not just looking at 2 planets connected, we're looking at 3. So this horoscope is one of my clients. She is an artist. And I started working with her many, many years ago when she was just starting out, and she was selling her art in shows in her art tent, usually outdoor shows. And she was selling art for $500, maybe $1,000 per original. And now, years later, her originals are going for many tens of thousands of dollars, and she's in big time galleries. And she has 2 important midpoint pictures that sort of point to that. So what you're seeing on screen and how I've annotated it with blue here, you're going to see that her midheaven is at the halfway point between her sun and the moon. And the way I notate that would be midheaven as the focal point, the point that is in the middle of the midpoint, equals sun diagonal / moon. Now the equals means that they are connected. And there is an important sentence or phrase that you can add here, which would be midheaven. And some of the key words would be career pursuits, professional public image, can be accomplished through the sun and moon blend, the core needs coming together. And in a moment here, I'm going to talk about how important the sun moon midpoint is. Out of all the midpoints, that's at the top of the list. That's coming up. But you put the equal sign to show that they are connected. Okay. Another one she has is Pluto equals Venus, Jupiter. Pluto is at the halfway point between Venus and Jupiter. So that's empowerment, or using power can be accomplished through Venus, Jupiter, creative enthusiasm. And that is what she does. Venus, Jupiter together, you can feel creativity. And she has become a powerful, accomplished, empowered artist. So we're going to look at a whole lot more of these, but this is how you can easily see it on the chart. You can do the math to find the midpoint. But when you form midpoint pictures, I highly recommend you keep your orbs at 2-degree max, meaning first, you find the midpoint between 2 planets. And then if there is a planet or an angle occupying that same place as the midpoint, keep it at 2 degrees max from the midpoint itself. I know astrologers' brains. Astrologers love to measure. In a sense, I think astrologers are a bit ADHD when it comes to information. I've been doing this many years. I've taught many, many students. And I find as soon as you get really good at a technique, what happens? You get bored and you want new techniques with more measurements and more information until the measurement pile is so deep and high that it's hard to sift through to see the main themes. So in my book, I want fewer measurements. I want to simplify. I want to see what is strongest. And I think there's genius in knowing what's important. So you keep your orbs tight. You're going to be tempted when we get to the midpoint pictures and I show you the 90-degree sort and you look at your own, you're going to be tempted to expand those orbs because you want more measurements, but I don't recommend it. So before I get to the 90-degree sort, let me just share with you the very best midpoint book I think that has ever been printed. That's just my personal opinion. By Don McBroom. He is a friend of mine. Don McBroom was Noel Tyl's assistant for many years in the Noel Tyl correspondence course that we had, and we used to have the seminars every year. And Don came up with this book. It was published in, I think, 2006, if I'm correct, somewhere right around there. And prior to this book, I really didn't use midpoints much. Don came out with this book. He taught a lecture at one of the Tyl seminars that I attended, and he handed out this handy dandy little handout for use of keywords in midpoint analysis. I have made that available as part of this lecture with permission from Don. Don is a friend of mine, so I contacted him, and I was so sad to see that this book is out of print. Please join me in visualizing this book coming back into print. I'm actively working to make that happen. And I would appreciate the collective energy to say, yes, let's bring this book back because it's fabulous. Don came up with a phrase, can be accomplished through, when you have the equal sign in a midpoint picture. And so we're going to develop that as we go through. Noel Tyl, my good friend. See, when Don retired as an astrologer, Noel made me his assistant. And so I was his assistant, his teaching assistant for many, many years. And Noel and I were good friends. We used to talk every day. He passed away 2 years ago. But Noel wrote the foreword for this book. And I thought it was very clever because Noel said, here's how you can use the phrase, creating a child can be accomplished through a male merging with a female. And if you were to notate that, it would be C for child, equals can be accomplished through, M for male, F for female with the diagonal slash. Is brilliant, right? So this is how I started to really get midpoints quickly and profoundly. And I hope that helps you. So here's an illustration. I changed it somewhat, but Don has something similar to this in his book. And here we have the midpoint picture of the sun equaling Mercury, Jupiter. So Mercury, Jupiter is the midpoint itself. Meaning you're going to look on a 90-degree sort, you're going to find what degree and mode the halfway point between Mercury and Jupiter in that chart. If the natal sun happens to be in the same degree and mode, which means that sun could be conjunct, square, or opposite that Jupiter, Mercury midpoint. I'll show you examples of that. Then you get this sun equals Mercury, Jupiter. The focal point would be the sun, the planet or the angle occupying the same degree and mode as the midpoint. So if you were to apply the key words that's on this sheet to start with anyway, then you would say for the sun, life, purpose, and ego definition. For the equal sign can be accomplished through, and you are going to merge Mercury and Jupiter. Communicating would be Mercury. Jupiter could be enthusiasm or optimism or expansion. Sun equals Mercury, Jupiter. Life, purpose, and ego definition can be achieved through communicating with expansion. This is the midpoint that you are going to see, or the midpoint picture you're going to see for many, many writers or high communicators or teachers. And so if I'm looking at a natal chart and there's a very strong third house emphasis, maybe a bit of a ninth house emphasis, but I'm not seeing Mercury stand out in the way that I would expect for a writer, then I go to the midpoints and I see this midpoint. It is adding nuance and detail to the fact that perhaps this person is a writer or involved somehow in communicating information. Now you can move these planets around and it's probably going to say the same thing. It could be Mercury equals Sun Jupiter. Jupiter equals Sun Mercury. You could add the midheaven. Midheaven equals Sun Jupiter. Midheaven equals Sun Mercury, and on and on. And you're still getting that same flavor, right? Isn't it interesting that right now, today, as I am lecturing, I created the midpoints for this moment in time. And right now, Jupiter is at the Sun-Mercury midpoint. And Sun is at the Mercury-Neptune midpoint. And what's happening? I'm teaching. I think that's fascinating. And the very last slide, I'm going to talk to you about how you can take midpoints for an event and how it helps to define the event. But another way to flush out this equation of a midpoint picture, to break it up, is that focal point, which is going to be the planet or the angle located at that halfway point between two planets. The focal point is what can be accomplished. The equal sign is can be accomplished through, and the first planet, second planet, the planets that are in the midpoint is how it can be accomplished. Think that one through. That's going to help you. Okay, this is from Dawn's book. All right, so now we have to ask this million-dollar question. What do midpoint pictures really offer in synthesis? When do we want to use them? How many midpoints do we need to look at? And this is important because of the overload of information that can so easily happen. What I think is essential is that the horoscope will show you the main themes of the life purpose. And many, many times you may not even need any midpoints at all to see those. You need to learn to see things in simplest term and trust what you see. But when, for instance, there's a horoscope that may show two very different themes in the horoscope, and I have one of those. I have a very Venusian, Neptunian theme, and then I have also in my life purpose a very Mars-Uranus theme. Two different people live in my horoscope, in a sense, right? And you're going to see some, if you're a consulting astrologer, you have probably seen that. And so this is when midpoints can be very helpful because it can flush out part of that life purpose a little bit more. But essentially, midpoint pictures are going to help to echo and reinforce what's already in that chart. It's not like midpoints are suddenly going to bring in something brand new that isn't already in the structure of that horoscope, but it can add nuance. It can add detail. Okay, so keep that in mind. Because we have to ask ourselves, realistically, do we need more measurements? Do we need this extra complication? There are an enormous number of midpoints. You could easily go into overwhelm. And I have had students where I say, here's the chart I want you to work on and include any pertinent midpoints. And then when we do the lesson, there are 70 midpoints they've included, and it's like most of them were not necessary. So again, fine tuning to know what's important. You want to seek the closest and most exact midpoint pictures. I'll show you that when we get to the 90-degree sort. We're getting there. So keep it tight. The most exact midpoint pictures are going to be the most powerful. I am going to show you how important it is to pay attention to midpoints at the Aries point. The Aries point is a brushstroke technique that I learned from Noel Tyl, and I have incorporated into my practice, and it is incredibly powerful. The Aries point is talking about 0 degree of any cardinal sign. We'll get there, and I'm going to do a slide on that. You absolutely want to look at any midpoint pictures involving the sun-moon midpoint, the halfway point between the sun and the moon. So I'm going to delineate that here in just a moment. We'll go into depth on that. So then there's the question, do we need to learn all the descriptions? Oh my God, that's so much information. I get this question a lot. And I say, no, don't try to learn all the descriptions. Learn to blend planetary potential together. Otherwise, it turns into a cookbook. This means that. And I have never been a fan of the formulaic code book, cookbook approach. You know, I've had students who started learning astrology many, many years ago when the cookbook approach was very popular. And I remember a few students who had the absolute hardcore belief that if there is contact in the natal chart between Mars and Pluto, conjunct, square, or opposite, that means the person is cruel. That's how they were taught. Mars-Pluto contact means cruelty. And there's a whole nother dimension to Mars-Saturn, but Mars-Pluto could also fit in. Mars-Saturn, Mars-Pluto means cruelty. There's many other interpretations of the combination of those two planets. So I always shy away from this means that. Of course, I'm a maverick personality. I make up my own rules sometimes. I think it's essential to learn the reality of the client I'm a modernistic, humanistic, therapeutic astrologer. That's my approach. It's what works for me. You notice the chart I showed, I should have mentioned this, was in the Placidus house cusps. I should mention this now. Some people may already be asking this. It doesn't matter if you use whole sign or Placidus. It doesn't matter which house system you use for midpoints. Midpoints are separate from house systems, and that's really beautiful. But I think it's important so that you don't do a cookbook approach of this means that. It's important to learn the reality of the client, and then you adjust the midpoint images to the life experiences being lived by the client. One person who has Sun equals Mercury, Jupiter may live it totally differently than another person based on their reality. And so we can't do a this means that. Okay. Now, again, let me show you this little piece of paper. It's been uploaded as a PDF. We have to thank Don McBroom for giving me permission to share this. I think it's brilliant, and I'm very happy to add that to this lecture to help you get your start in making keywords with midpoints. All right, so finally, here we go. Here's a midpoint sort, 90-degree midpoint sort. Now, I have a Mac, and the program I'm still using is the IO Astrology Time Cycles program, which is now defunct. I'm blessing my computer so that the program continues to work, because I've been using it since it was released, and I love this program. I am now segueing into another program called Astro Peregrine, which is brand new. And I'm going to show you in a few slides here what the midpoint sort looks like through that program. Because when you go to look for the 90-degree midpoint sort on your computer, it depends on which program you have as to how it's going to be listed. You know, when IO Astrology basically went out of business, they referred all of the users to AstroGold. And I did purchase AstroGold, and I downloaded it. And I'm not happy with their 90-degree midpoint sort. And if I could connect with them and say, please, can you change it so it's formatted like this, that would make me very, very happy. Because on AstroGold, you have to find it under midpoint sorted by mode, I believe. But they have 3 pages instead of one. 1 page for cardinal, 1 for mutable, 1 for fixed. And it is not conducive to getting the kind of information that I can get instantly from this one sheet. Solar Fire, I know you can find it, and I think it's called 90-degree mode for midpoint options. So, and I can't address the other programs because I haven't viewed them. But this is a very common thing, the midpoint sorted in a 90-degree dial, which then puts all the midpoints in natal positions sorted by modality. So what you have up on screen is for Jim Carrey, the actor. And I have added these red lines. So this is my annotation on here because I wanted to show you that the first 30 degrees in a 90-degree midpoint sort will be all of the natal planets or angles or midpoints in the cardinal modality. So from 0 actually to 2959, you are going to see midpoints and planets in the cardinal modality. You will not know what sign, but you will know it's in the same modality. So are you already putting together that this is going to show conjunction, square, or opposition contact between planets? Look at Venus for Jim Carrey at 24, the Sun at 26 cardinal. You know that has to be a conjunction because Venus can't be square or opposite the Sun. In the next slide, I'll go deeper into this, okay? But just looking at the structure from 30 degrees to 5959 are all the planets and midpoints in the fixed modality. And then from 60 degrees to 8959, all the planets and midpoints and angles in the mutable modality, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Let me show you the same slide of Jim Carrey, but now what I've done is highlighted the angles and the planets and the nodal axis so that it pops out a little bit more. Because the reason I'm doing this, because right now I'm not even talking about midpoints, I'm talking about the 90-degree sort and how helpful it can be in looking at the natal chart, not in chart form, but in this form. Because instantly what this allows you to see is hard contact between planets. Conjunct, square, and opposite, I think, are aspects of developmental tension and incredibly powerful. So again, go back to his Mars. We know Jim Carrey has a cardinal Mars at 17 degrees 55. We know his Sun and Venus are conjunct 26 and 24 degrees cardinal. You look at the birth data, so you know his Sun is in Capricorn. He's born January 17th. But look down here. Here's his Saturn at 31-35. All right, so when we get beyond 30 degrees, first we understand the mode, and Saturn is going to be in the fixed modality. And in order to find the degree, most of you have probably figured out, you subtract 30. So Jim Carrey's Saturn is at 1 degree fixed 35. Now, for those of you who see a lot of clients or who work with the ephemeris a lot, maybe you automatically know, just as I do, that in 1962, Saturn was in Aquarius. I carry part of the ephemeris in my brain with me because I use it so often. So I memorize things. So I know Jim Carrey had Saturn at 1 Aquarius. Now look at this. His Sun is 26 cardinal. His Saturn is 1 Aquarius, or 1 fixed. I know that they are in contact by conjunction, square, or opposition. Well, I know in this case it's going to be conjunction because I just happen to know in 62 Saturn was 1 Aquarius. Because of the orb, there's 5 degrees orb between these two planets, and it depends on what orbs you use for your aspects. I happen to use 7 degrees for conjunct, square, and opposite. If you go to this middle column, we are in the fixed modality here. And you look at Neptune, Jupiter, Mercury, and ascendant, 43, 44, and 45. Okay, so you subtract 30. That gives you Neptune in the fixed modality at 13, Jupiter in the fixed at 14, Mercury in the fixed modality at 14, and ascendant at 15. Okay, they are connected. And can you see, just using this 90-degree midpoint sort, how you can look at that and go, wow, this is a creative communicator. And he needs to radiate that to the world, probably with a lot of high sensitivity. You know, Jim Carrey's also an artist. He's not just an actor. And I can instantly feel and sense and see those planets in hard contact. Sun, Venus, Neptune, Jupiter, Mercury, ascendant. And this is not even midpoints. This is just natal analysis. So I'm just trying to help you understand the value of the 90-degree midpoint sort even before we get to midpoints. The nodal axis up here at 48, which would translate to 18 fixed, is going to be connected to Mercury, ascendant, Jupiter, and nodal axis, depending on what orb you use for contact to the natal axis or the nodal axis. But the nodal axis in this context is the relationship with the public, especially when used in midpoints. So we'll get there. I'll show you some examples. And then when we get to Pluto and Moon in the mutable modality, now you have to subtract 60 degrees in order to find the natal degree. So Pluto would be 9 mutable and the Moon would be 17 mutable. Okay, so there's value in just looking at the natal planets in the midpoint sort. And one of the assignments I give to quite a few students would be, I send them a mystery 90-degree midpoint sort. And I say, analyze this. How much can you see just from this, even without looking at the chart? You can see a lot. And so here I'm going to show you Jim Carrey's chart just so you can make that connection here. So you see he's got Uranus conjunct the ascendant. Oh, I didn't talk about that. I missed that when I was talking about the 90-degree sort. Major statement here that I would see if I were looking at this. midheaven at 57, which of course is 27 fixed, Uranus at 59, which is 29 fixed. We don't know what sign looking at this midpoint sort, but you can't miss the statement of Uranus and midheaven together, conjunct, square, or opposite. Those two energies must work together. And in Leo and in a conjunction, well, think about Jim Carrey, his unique style, his rubbery face, all those contortions he could do with his facial expressions. And you'll see Uranus is circled here. And that's because of one of the brushstroke techniques I use, I learned from Noel Tyl, called unaspected planets. I don't have time to go into deep analysis of unaspected planets. I would love to. I would love to do a lecture just on unaspected planets. But what I will say is when a planet does not receive one of the 5 main Ptolemaic aspects, planet to planet, not planet to angle, which is what you see here, but planet to planet, it's not as integrated in the chart, and it has a very loud voice. It dominates the frequency. And you could easily say, it makes sense with Jim Carrey that might be Uranus, right? He had a unique expression. But you see here, this whole cluster of information, Jupiter, Neptune, Mercury ascendant. Now you see that it's actually a square. But it doesn't matter because to me, it said the same thing. So I'm not going to go in depth on Jim Carrey's midpoints right now. But when you go back and you look at the recording, you could spend some time looking at this and you could apply those keywords and you can get a heck of a lot of information from it. Let me show you what the 90-degree midpoint sort looks like through the new program that I am moving to, which is AstroPeregrine. John Foster is one of my friends, and he was also part of the Noel Tyl group. So he's like family to me, in the Tyl family, so to speak. And he came up with this program, and he just recently launched it to the public. I've been using it as a beta tester for about the last year or more. So the website's astroperegrine.com if you want to check it out. I like it. I like it a lot. And it works on PC and Mac. And no, I am not getting a commission for this. I'm just sharing it largely because I'm very happy I found a program that does a midpoint sort as I like it, as my eye is used to it. Anyway, I appreciate John's effort in getting this program out. All right. Now, let's have some fun. And once you start working with Midpoint Pictures in blending planets together, you might do what I do, which is to actually create pictures in your head, or you go through life and you see things happen and you convert it to a midpoint picture. I do that all the time. All the time. And so I thought to myself, if I'm thinking of a midpoint picture, how could I depict that in life? And I thought, the middle seat on an airplane, because you are in the midpoint of 2 people. Now, I personally do not like the middle seat on an airplane. I just don't. I have a very strong Neptunian signature in my chart, and I don't like people that I don't know having their energy so close and invading my space. That's just me. They may be very nice people, but I prefer not to be in the middle seat. However, when you become a midpoint. And I have had situations where I've been the midpoint for 2 people who are fighting, or 2 people who are sharing food back and forth. And I'm in the midpoint. I'm the focal planet. Maybe you have too. But here in this picture, the focal point would be the man sitting in the middle. And I thought, well, he looks like Jupiter to me. And I thought, okay, the woman who's on her phone, probably scrolling through social media, seems like Venus. And the man on the other side, dressed in business attire with a nice smile on his face, on his computer, seems like Saturn, seems like a businessman, a happy Saturn. Then maybe we could say this is Jupiter equals Venus, Saturn. We don't need to interpret it right now, but we're trying to convert astrological symbolism into pictures and otherwise. Here's another example. The man in the middle, again, dressed in business attire. This time, he doesn't have a smile on his face. He looks a little annoyed. Could be Saturn. The man on the left, I think, is Uranus. At least that's a possibility, right? Lime green hat, lime green sunglasses, big smile. He's showing his uniqueness and individuality. The woman on the right with her cell phone, it's like she's taking a selfie. Maybe that's Venus. Saturn equals Venus, Uranus. Depicted in a picture form. One more. Again, the center one is, I could say, Saturn. And he's just going, oh my God. The man on the right who's fallen asleep on his shoulder. Have you ever had that happen? I have. Could be Neptune because he's merging and blending with him. The man on the right with the sandwich and his elbows out, taking up all kinds of space. Could be Jupiter, expansive, with a big sandwich. Isn't that interesting? Learn to think like that. Learn to convert life into astrological symbolism. It's fun and it will help your analysis. Okay, so now let's get into one of the most important midpoints. The most essential would be the halfway point between your sun and your moon. And here's why. It integrates your emotional needs and your ego needs, helping to define your life purpose. I have an interesting view on the sun and the moon in my own unique way. I see the sun in the natal chart and the sign that it is in, really showing us what we are here to learn about. Using the fuel of that sun, the element, the modality of that sun. We are looking through that perspective and we are learning about that sign for this incarnation. Of course, I do look at the horoscope from a multi-lifetime point of view. You may or may not, but let me toss this out there for your consideration. The moon, I tend to feel that the moon shows us what we may have some familiarity with, some skills. We may have fully explored the sign in which we find our moon. So it's almost like the moon sign is a toolbox and we bring those skills in with us and we can reach in at any time. There's great familiarity with our moon. So then the sun moon midpoint would integrate who we have been and who we are becoming. But the bottom line, the easiest way to say this is the sun moon midpoint is joining our two core needs, that halfway point between the sun and the moon. And the midpoint is going to be the shortest distance between the two planets, by the way. So when you're looking at the 90-degree midpoint sort, the way you figure out the sign is you look at the chart. Okay. Now, if you have a planet or an angle at the same degree and mode as your sun moon midpoint, this is very, very important to note. Not all of you will have this, but if you find a client or a family member, or if you have it, then you have to understand that that planet or angle is going to become very powerful in your life purpose, that you have a special connection with that planet. You are keyed to the frequency of that planet, and that planet is going to play out in your life purpose and all that you do. Okay. And the more you work with that planet or angle, the principle of the focal point planet, the more your life will come together. So let me show you some examples now, because this one is so important. I recommend you include the sun moon midpoint on every single chart that you look at. If you find, and again, remembering the focal point can be conjunct, square, or opposite the midpoint. Oh, I know some of you probably just asked this question. I just felt it. You might be asking yourself, if the focal point in the midpoint picture is square the midpoint, would you interpret it differently than opposite the midpoint or conjunct the midpoint? And that's an excellent question, but I have learned to not differentiate, to just say it's developmental contact. To me, it doesn't matter if it's conjunct, square, or opposite, they're still joined by developmental tension. Okay. You may choose otherwise, but I have found that through thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of client consultations I've done, that it doesn't matter if it's conjunct, square, or opposite, they are still working together. So I'm going to give you some keywords. I'm going to go through all the midpoint pictures with the sun moon. Now, the sentence that I mentioned can be accomplished through. I don't necessarily use that so much with the sun moon midpoint because I convert sun moon midpoint to core needs instantly. So here's how I would put it. When you find a midpoint picture of midheaven equals sun moon, what tends to take place is that the career becomes very, very purposeful and more easily projected because career is connected to the core needs for this life, this incarnation. And people with that midpoint picture tend to get a little bit more publicity if they choose it, if they step into it. Okay. Ascendant equals sun moon. So if the halfway point between sun moon is conjunct, square, or opposite the ascendant, then the identity expression is so very important to know who you are and to be able to express it easily and fully. And sometimes ascendant equals sun moon midpoint, seek the limelight and get it. If they choose to do that, they tend to be seen easily. If you find nodes equal sun moon, remember in midpoint pictures, the nodes can suggest the relationship with the masses, relationship with the public. So in this case, nodes are very connected with the core needs of the life purpose. And that would be a powerful potential, powerful connection with the masses. Okay, here's a horoscope for Mercury equals sun moon. This is a delightful combination. My husband has this, so I feel like I've specialized it. We've been married 34 years, so I live with a Mercury equals sun moon. It enhances Mercury. Just think, all it does is it makes Mercury part of the core needs. It keys you to that frequency. It's going to be a powerful statement. So you get somebody who's sometimes very talkative. Like my husband can chat with anybody, anytime. He can start a conversation anywhere we go. He's very gifted at that. My husband was a TV news broadcaster and investigative reporter and radio guy. Mercury equals sun moon. Makes sense, right? Very often there is an information junkie signature, high communication needs, and usually they're very, very bright people. On screen is the chart for Snoop Dogg, the famous rapper, the high communicator musician, right? Makes sense. And he has Mercury equals sun moon. His sun moon midpoint is 6 Scorpio. So if you look and you see the halfway point between his sun and moon on the chart, you can imagine that that would be Mercury. If you did the math, if you found out how many degrees are between the sun and the moon, and then you cut that in half, add it to the lower value planet, you find the midpoint. Now, Snoop Dogg's Mercury is strong because it's conjunct an angle anyway, but it makes it extra strong because it also equals the sun moon midpoint. Okay, I think I just heard somebody ask this in my head. I'm not looking at chat, so I don't know if you did. You're probably asking, why don't I include the sun moon midpoint automatically on the chart? Well, there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, IO Astrology didn't give you that option. And I'm actually phenomenally grateful it did not. Astro Peregrine, which is the program I'm starting to use, and Astro Gold does give you that option to include the sun moon midpoint on the natal chart. But I'm not a big fan of that, and here's why. When I have assigned charts to some of the students I work with privately, and I remind them, always find that sun moon midpoint and always tell me if there's a midpoint picture. Well, if they have it directly on the chart, so often they forget to look for squares and oppositions because astrologers these days tend to be dependent on the computer to tell them where there's an aspect. And there are quite a few astrologers who don't use their eye to calculate aspects anymore. And that's unfortunate. So Sometimes I think if you have the sun moon midpoint on the chart, you won't look for those other aspects and you might miss information. Plus, I want to make it special. And plus, I want to make sure I look at the 90-degree midpoint sort for every chart I look at. So that's why. Okay, moving on. Venus equals sun moon. Just feel that. If Venus is at the halfway point of the sun moon midpoint, then Venus needs become very, very important. Social needs, relationship needs, connecting with other people, harmony, love, beauty, all of that becomes very, very, very important. My daughter has Venus equals sun moon, and it has been a delight to watch her grow up. She's now an adult. And guess what? She has chosen as her career event planning. So she plans huge weddings. She plans huge parties and events. She is in the field that is a social event field, and she does it extremely well. Quite often, people with Venus equals sun moon have a lot of friends, or need to have social connection a lot. And my daughter did. She had social connection. Her calendar was booked. Let me just say that. And quite often, people with Venus equals sun moon are very harmonious. There's an elegance many times. It depends on the whole chart, obviously. It always depends on the whole chart. You can also get Venus equals sun moon flowing into artistic energy, maybe singing, maybe acting, maybe art itself, graphic art or whatever, the awareness of beauty. And sometimes bodybuilders will have this, wanting to make the body beautiful. Okay, there's more. Let's look at Mars equals sun moon. Big change in energy now. Did you feel that? Mars equals sun moon. It's a totally different energy than Venus equals sun moon. And here on screen, if you're out of the country, out of the United States, you may or may not know who this is. It's Rush Limbaugh. Let me explain. If you're in the United States, chances are very high you know who this is. Rush Limbaugh is now deceased, but he was a very famous conservative talk show host on the radio. And his radio shows were a monologue, and they were aggressive, assertive, acerbic, argumentative, as he argued his position from a conservative point of view. Now, you may or may not like what he had to say, but it clearly, perfectly illustrates Mars equals sun moon, the drive or the core needs connected to assertive energy or competition. It can be also athletic energy in some cases. So I put a little red arrow where Mars is to allow you to see it's the halfway point between sun moon. This is one you can easily do in your head in a snap, because you look at the sun and the moon, you see that's a sextile plus 2 degrees, 62 degrees. Cut that in half and add it to the sun, and you will advance to where Mars is located in the chart. Okay. Mars happens to rule the 3rd house of communication. So, in Rush Limbaugh's chart, you're not seeing a whole lot of Mercury energy, except Mercury is at the Aries point in Capricorn, the very end of it. But I'm not going there because that's a separate lecture and I'll get sidetracked. But Mars also rules the midheaven in classical astrology, in the traditional rulerships. I do use modern rulerships, but I will also notice Mars rules the 3rd and the midheaven. Now, we have to see the fact that the sun moon midpoint is also square to the midheaven, because the sun moon midpoint is conjoined with Mars, and the midheaven is 21 Scorpio. And you have to be able to see that. Now, think about that for Rush Limbaugh. Midheaven equals Mars equals sun moon. Career energy and the drive to be assertive or combative or argumentative or motivational energy is the keyword I would use for Mars, is connected with the core needs. Perfect example. So, some Mars equals sun moon people might be particularly combative. Some might just be very good at sales, marketing, promotion. All of those can be connected with Mars. It depends on the entire chart. Here we have a photo of Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, big time author, speaker, and he has a midpoint picture of Jupiter equals sun moon. Now, feel that if you've ever read any of Tony Robbins' books or listened to his lectures, can't you feel Jupiter equals sun moon? Jupiter, the optimism, the enthusiasm, the positivity is part of his core needs. I met Tony Robbins in the 80s. One of my clients was his organizer for his fire walks and lectures, and he came to Denver, and I asked her, can I please meet him because I want to get his birth time? And she set up a private meeting. I think it was 1985, something like that. Can't remember, but it was in the 80s. And big, tall, towering man, Jupiter. And he was very nice. And we had about 10 minutes to chat. And I said, listen, I'm an astrologer. May I please have your birth time? And immediately gave it to me. I was really happy about that. But later, when I learned midpoints and I saw this Jupiter equals sun moon, I went, it's so obvious that he would have that signature. Okay, changing the energy is for just a second here. Now we go to Saturn equals sun moon and see if I'm blending with the energy. I want to slow down my speech. Can you feel it? Ooh, energy just came down for a second. And we have on screen the photograph of Fred Rogers. Again, if you're not in the United States, you may or may not know of him. But here in the US, he had a children's show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And not too long ago, there was a movie about him, and Tom Hanks starred in it playing Fred Rogers. I don't remember the name of that movie. I'm sorry, but it's out there. Now, Fred Rogers was a very gentle man, and he spoke very slowly to the children, laying foundational concepts of lovingness and harmony and all that. And he had Saturn equals sun moon. So here's where Saturn stands out. It can be duty and responsibility, but it can be serious. It can also be patience. Saturn is part of the core needs for fulfillment in this lifetime. You can also sometimes, when you see a person who has Saturn equals sun moon, sometimes that can suggest somebody who works with the elderly, who has a very special understanding of the elderly. Sometimes it can be somebody who has incredible business acumen, very, very good business sense. So it's many ways it can manifest. On screen, we have Bob Dylan. Look at that hair and look at the midpoint. Uranus equals sun moon. Makes sense, right? Bob Dylan, the singer, very unique, highly individualized, would have Uranus equals sun moon. He's a maverick. Uranus is a maverick planet. When you see Uranus in this kind of midpoint picture, there's a need for freedom, a need for adventure, a need to be a nonconformist, innovative, cutting edge, humanistic. Many astrologers, by the way, will have a Uranus signature. Now, not everybody agrees that Uranus represents astrology. So I don't want to get in a conflict or argument about this. I happen to think it does. I feel that resonance very much. And Noel Tyl had Uranus equals sun moon. I'm going to be showing you his midpoint pictures in a moment. But a lot of astrologers have this, but a lot of mavericks have it. I have a lot of clients who are Navy SEALs or special ops in the military. I mean, I live in Virginia Beach, largest naval base in the United States. And they have Uranus equals sun moon because there is that pervasive need for freedom, excitement, adventure. It can show up in many different ways. But Bob Dylan, did you know he won the Nobel Peace Prize? I hope I'm correct on this because I remember reading it. He didn't show up to receive the prize. He didn't show up to the ceremony. I was really applauding him, going, and you're thinking he's saying, I don't play that game. I play my own game. I thought that was great. Okay, now we have Neptune equals sun moon. That happens to be my midpoint picture. And so Neptune comes forward, very, very powerful. Now, if you looked at my chart, and I don't like showing my chart necessarily, but if you did, my Neptune is in the 6th house, and it has a sextile to Pluto. Well, everybody my age had Pluto sextile Neptune, not a big deal. Neptune is square my midheaven exactly. So that's a statement. But, you know, people look at my chart and they don't even see Neptune because it doesn't seem to make a statement. Well, let me tell you, I live and breathe Neptunian energy every day and always have. Neptune equals sun moon. I can attest this is absolutely part of my life path. Now, if you heard me say Neptune is exactly square my Neptune is exactly square my midheaven, some of you may have just put together that I have the midpoint picture, midheaven equals Neptune equals sun moon, right? I do. And when I was even 5 years old, I was getting clairvoyant visions. I was able to see auras. I would tell my mom, can't you see that person is lying? Because I could see their aura change. I was holding little seances in the laundry room, trying to bring in Jesus or Buddha. That's Neptune. I was interested in psychic development. I was interested in all things metaphysical. I started studying astrology when I was 8. Neptune, Neptune, Neptune. Enhanced sensitivity, potential spirituality, creative expression, potential visionary. I also created art and had an art career running parallel with astrology for 12 years. Neptune equals sun moon. But for sure, you could add the sense of sensitivity when you see that Neptune equals sun moon. The empath, somebody who tends to be naturally psychically open, or visionary capability, high creativity. And last in this section, Pluto equals sun moon. Now, before we look at the example I have on screen, let me say this. Pluto can be prominence when it's with the sun moon midpoint, or it can make that statement to say, if you have Pluto conjunct square or opposite the sun moon midpoint within 2 degrees or less, then prominence may be part of the life purpose path. Exploring power, knowing how to use power wisely or not. A lot of politicians have this. Would you be surprised to hear that? A lot of politicians have this. Of course, you have to have their exact birth time to be finding the sun moon midpoint because the moon moves so many degrees per day. A lot of politicians will have a Plutonian statement, Pluto on an angle, Pluto unaspected, Pluto equals sun moon, Pluto oriental. That's a separate lecture. But we feel that Pluto equals sun moon as part of the life purpose, prominence, exploration of power. Now let's look at the example. This is the 90-degree midpoint sort for famous boxer and athlete Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay. And he has this very, very dynamic midpoint picture. Mars equals Pluto equals sun moon. Put those 3 energies together. What does that tell you? You can feel that flavor, right? If Mars equals Pluto equals sun moon, if you converted that to music, what kind of music would that be? It wouldn't be meditation music, right? Neptune equals sun moon might be, but Mars equals Pluto equals sun moon, it would be gritty. It would be a lot of bass. It would be a lot of percussion. It might be rock. It would be jagged, right? If it was a texture, it wouldn't be silk. The texture of Mars equals Pluto equals sun moon would be like Kevlar, what a warrior would wear when they go into combat, something that could take a pounding. And so here we have the way Muhammad Ali used it was as a very physical man using power as an athlete and a boxer. It's fascinating, isn't it? Beautiful example here. There's more to his story, but I just wanted to point that out. Okay, let's take a deep breath. I need some oxygen. Maybe you do too. We're going to talk about the next series of midpoints that I think are very, very powerful and important. I look at them in every single horoscope I do, and that would be midpoints at the Aries point. So even though I can't go into super depth about how potent the Aries point is, let me just say this. The part of the zodiac that starts at 29 mutable and goes through 1 cardinal is a very special point. The peak part of the Aries point is 0 cardinal, the beginning of any season. So we're talking about any one of the cardinal signs: 0, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. And it really starts in activation at 29 mutable, goes through 1 cardinal, offers high visibility and potential for public externalized focus. Okay. If you find a midpoint, and that would be on the midpoint sort at 89, because that's 29 mutable, or 0 or 1. So that'd be 0 cardinal, 1 cardinal. Pay attention to them. They tell you something. Midpoints at the Aries point, abbreviated AP, suggest how we want to be seen or how we are easily seen, how we stand out. There is that signature energy that is noticeable about us. For instance, I'll share with you mine. I have, and this is how you would write it, AP equals Jupiter Uranus. So my Jupiter Uranus midpoint is 0 cardinal. And I can tell you, I feel that because the kind of branding I live as an astrologer is branding that is very maverick, very much independent, very much oriented towards the messaging of planets don't control me. Planets don't do something to me. I do something. So there's a freedom energy. There's free will. I use a lot of free will in my talks. And I'm also very much a maverick. I host the Maverick podcast. AP equals Jupiter Uranus. Okay. Freedom is very important to me. I don't like rules for the sake of rules, on and on and on and on. So imagine if somebody had AP equals Sun Venus. They would be seen through the lens of Sun Venus. That feels good, right? Or AP equals Mercury Jupiter. Again, I mentioned that with the writer's signature. That's another one you can bring in. AP equals Mercury Jupiter, very common for writers, or AP equals Sun Mercury, very common for writers. Let me share with you 2 examples of very important midpoints located at that Aries point. And that would be first, AP equals the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So when you find Jupiter-Pluto, either 29 mutable, 0 or 1 cardinal, there is the potential for enhanced wealth, power, high success. Now, does it mean automatically if somebody has AP equals Jupiter-Pluto, would you say, hey, you're going to be wealthy, powerful, and successful? No, that's cookbook. But there's the potential for that should they choose to walk through those doors and shine in that way. Okay. And what is wealth? What is success? It's different to each person. I have some clients with AP Jupiter-Pluto who would not be considered wealth as in having billions or millions of dollars, but they would be considered wealthy in my book because they have 0 debt, they own their own house, nice retirement, and get to go play and have fun. Well, I think that's a wealth signature right there. So it depends, right? But I have some examples on screen. Probably you've been reading them. Oprah Winfrey started off very poor, born in Mississippi, worth millions, billions, I don't know, but very wealthy, high success. Jeffrey Epstein, Elton John, Marilyn Monroe started off very poor, wound up very wealthy. Tragic ending. Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson. So the doors to high visibility seem to open more easily for these people. and the opportunity for wealth and high success should they choose to activate that. That's a nice one. I want to sign up for that one next lifetime. If I could place my order, right? Another one, now we're going to change the flavor dynamically. AP equals Saturn Pluto. Put Saturn Pluto together. Now, mix that with the AP, which is high visibility, potential for public projection. Noel Tyl came up with this one, and I thought it was rather brilliant personally. And he suggested AP equals Saturn Pluto. Think to yourself the possibility that there are skeletons in the closet. So maybe for some of you who aren't in the United States, you wonder, what the heck does that mean? Many times what this can suggest is somebody with AP equals Saturn Pluto might be somebody who has something from their early life, usually childhood, and maybe there's some shame or embarrassment, something that they want to keep in the closet so that nobody sees it. I've had many, many clients with this example. One client whose father was a politician, a pretty well-known politician, and his father by day seemed like a good guy, very respected. By night, would come home and beat him with a belt. And this man had in his chart AP equals Saturn Pluto. And when I first started consulting with him, I saw this. You don't want to come right out with a client and go, hey, you've got skeletons in the closet. What's going on? That's just not respectful or wise. You want to gently move into this, gain rapport. I can gain rapport pretty quickly with a client, and they will reveal it to me very quickly. And, at some point, if it feels right, you can say, there's a suggestion here of skeletons in the closet, maybe from early life. What does that mean to you? Most of the times I don't have to say that because they've already revealed it. But the stories you will hear are amazing. I have another client whose mother was addicted to prescription medication. Really zoned out, addicted. She was an only child. And she literally tried to keep her mom hidden in the house because she would embarrass her horribly because she was totally gone on prescription drugs. AP equals Saturn Pluto. When I asked her, if I said skeletons in the closet, can you relate to that? And she turned white as a sheet and she told me the story. So it's a nuance, and it's worth some counseling and therapeutic approach. What I have on screen is a man. You see down here that he has Mars at the Aries point. So it's 29 mutable. Natal Mars equals Saturn Pluto. Put those three planets together. Doesn't that just give you pause? Mars equals Saturn Pluto. Now, does that always mean something horrible? No. Hillary Clinton in her natal chart has Mars, Saturn, Pluto all together in Leo. We still don't know her exact birth time. We think we do, but I don't know if it's right. But she has Mars, Saturn, Pluto together. Now, you may love her, you may not like her, but she is a strategic genius in politics. No doubt about it. Mars, Saturn, Pluto, natal signature. So in this midpoint, AP equals Mars equals Saturn, Pluto. And actually go up here to 0 cardinal, and you see also equals Sun, Uranus. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that's a totally different signature than Saturn, Pluto. It blows my mind. What does that mean? This would be a case of somebody who has two totally different themes in his chart. I'm not going to go in depth in analyzing this because there's not time, but I will tell you the Saturn Pluto part. This man was sexually abused as a child. Mars equals Saturn Pluto. And he also was a high energy student when he was young in school, ADHD type, couldn't sit still, needed to radiate intense energy and get it out of his system. Unfortunately, the way they dealt with it was criticism. and they drugged him with Ritalin, and he didn't get the support he needed. It's a very sad situation, but he's a delightful man now that he's healed and rectified and worked on releasing the victimization from being sexually abused. He's able to manifest these other beautiful potentials in his chart. But that gave me pause when I first looked at that, and I knew in consultation I was going to have to address it, and it became a central theme. Okay, so here is a photo of my dear friend Noel Tyl. I feel like he's in the room now with us there, in this photo, but I wanted to show you his 90-degree midpoint sort for two reasons. Number one, he has influenced my astrological practice dramatically. We even did a 9-video series called Tyl Masterwork series, and it is for sale on that website, where I tried to capture his legacy. We shot it, I think, in 2010 or 2012, before he passed away in 2019. But the reason I wanted to show you this is because Noel has had Midpoint Pictures that could show 2 different tracks. All right. So before he did an astrological career, he was a famous opera singer. He was gifted. He sang Wagner. He was Wotan, the king of the gods, and his voice was incredible. One time after we shot the Tyl Masterwork videos, we shot him at our house because my husband is a videographer. We have a studio. We took Noel out to dinner at an Italian restaurant, and I gave him some red wine, got him relaxed, and I asked him, please, would you let me hear your singing voice? In the middle of a packed Italian restaurant, Noel let out 2 notes with his operatic voice. Swear to God, the entire restaurant went silent because the power of his voice was profound. And then everybody started to clap. So I could get tears in my eyes now. I better distract me back to the midpoints. It was a powerful moment. Since we're talking about singing and the whole creative world that Noel had, let's look at those midpoints, which are highlighted in red. I need to breathe for a second. Now I'm feeling Noel's energy very strongly. Here we have natal Venus equals Mercury, Neptune. Feel that. Venus equals Mercury, Neptune. Can you easily put together a sentence that says, this guy needs to be creative? Can you think opera singer? You wouldn't automatically think opera singer, but you could think aesthetic creative needs can be accomplished through communicating creatively, right? And Venus equals Neptune, Pluto. Well, aesthetic needs can be accomplished through creative power. And if you ever heard his voice, there you go. That moment in the restaurant was this midpoint right here. Also, look at this one down lower, annotated in red, midheaven. So career pursuits, professional public image can be accomplished through Neptune, Venus. Now, are you hearing the same tones here? Midheaven equals Venus, Neptune. Isn't that so similar to Venus equals Mercury, Neptune? Can you make that connection? Can you feel that those essences are repeating? If I'm scanning this, I'm going to go, okay, I'm picking up Neptunian and Venus tones mixed with some Mercury. It's like those energies go together like perfect seasoning in a spaghetti sauce. You've got rosemary, you've got oregano, you've got some garlic, they all go together, they harmonize. Down here, though, if you look, midheaven equals moon Saturn. So career pursuits, public image can be accomplished through structured emotional power or emotional connection with stability and structure. Well, that's opera singing. I asked him once, I said, wasn't it just the most wonderful thing to have that music flowing through you in a performance? And he goes, nope, it was hard work. just like that. Very different than if you're in a rock band, and you're jamming. There's incredible discipline with opera. Midheaven equals Moon Saturn. I also have midheaven equals Sun Uranus, but really that one is more connected with astrology. Feel that, right? Let's look at these midpoints in purple, the ones that I think are very much connected with his astrological mind and career. Ascendant at the Aries point. AP equals ascendant. He was highly visible, period. Boom. Well, he was almost 7 feet tall, but he had that in his chart too. Look at this Aries point, midpoint down here at 29, Venus, Uranus. Ascendant equals Venus, Uranus. So high visibility, AP, equals ascendant, which is identity, definition, personal projection, can be accomplished through creative individualization or understanding social patterns humanistically. See how that works? You also have ascendant equals Jupiter nodes, connection with the masses. Ascendant equals Moon, Uranus, emotional energy with humanistic energy. You have Jupiter equals Uranus, midheaven. Are you hearing the same tones now? You're picking up Jupiter, you're picking up Uranus, midheaven, moon, nodal axis. Look at down here, bottom of the second column, top of the third column, Uranus equals sun, moon. Uranus equals Saturn, nodal axis. Noel was a Capricorn. He was very structured. And one of the gifts that he gave in astrology was incredible structure and strategy in astrology. And the ascendant midheaven, midpoint. That's also a very, very important one. I didn't have time to fully flesh that out in this presentation, but pay attention to that. Ascendant midheaven midpoint is your personal projection through career. If you have a midpoint picture with that, like Noel, Uranus equals ascendant midheaven, Uranus equals sun, moon. It's very powerful. And then last over here on the final column, Saturn equals Uranus, Pluto, Saturn equals Mercury, Uranus. You put all that together, you're hearing the same things over and over, many different ways. This is how you use midpoints. If you need to look at the midpoint pictures, then you go back to the chart and you go, okay, I see it. I see it. I see these themes. But for Noel, if you didn't know him, if he was a private client coming in 50 years ago, I would say I see two different focuses here, a very creative, smooth focus and highly individualized focus. Tell me, what does that mean to you? Interesting, right? Okay, this is the last slide I'm going to show you. Let me check what I'm doing on time. Ooh, I'm doing pretty good. All right. I want to talk to you about how you can use midpoint pictures for events. So I started off early saying I created the 90-degree midpoint sort for this time while I'm lecturing. And sure enough, Jupiter equaled Mercury, Sun, Mercury at the beginning of this lecture. Well, still now. And Sun equaled Mercury, Neptune. And what am I doing? I'm teaching. I'm speaking, I'm lecturing, and you will find that for an important event, the midpoints will echo what the event is about. And sometimes what I have done for many, many, many years is that if there is a harsh event happening in the world, maybe it's an explosion, maybe it's a severe weather event like a tornado that demolished a town. Maybe it's a mass shooting. Those are sad, they're intense. But if I can get the exact time for when the event happened, I did this for 15 years. I collected the data, I would make the chart, and then I would look at the midpoints. Inevitably, most times there's going to be a planet on an angle, and then there are going to be certain midpoints that stand out. Now, I also will do this for the ingress charts. So what you see on screen here is the Aries ingress that just happened recently on March 20th. I set this for Washington, D.C. because I live in the United States. if you did it for the nation that you live in, the capital of the nation, try it for Jerusalem in Israel. Try it for Paris. There's a lot going on in those countries right now. I calculated those too, but let's go back to this for the United States and what's on screen right now. The ingress charts will give me the flavor of what that seasonal energy may carry for that nation. Now, these always give me pause. And here we have Pluto at the time of the ingress. Pluto was at 29 Capricorn, equaling the Saturn-Mars midpoint. Pluto equals Mars-Saturn. Put those together. Very similar to that chart I showed you where Mars equaled Saturn-Pluto. You pause for a minute and you go, ooh, what's that about? It's not always going to absolutely be terrible. I don't really jump into the malefics are bad and now we have to prepare ourselves for horrible things. I don't do that. It's all potential. But Pluto equaled Mars Saturn. I looked at it for the ingress and I thought, that's for all over the world. That's not just for the United States. That's going to be interesting. That's a pressure. It's a heaviness. Things are in the middle of a change right now, right? Now look at echoed and reinforced by Uranus at the time of the ingress equals Saturn-Pluto. That's volatile. It's pointy. It's jagged. It's intense. And for the United States, Uranus equals Pluto ascendant within 2 degrees, a little bit more than 2 degrees, which I normally wouldn't do, but it was echoing this Pluto midpoint picture over here. So you see why I did that? Now look in the 4th column, Saturn equals Mercury, Pluto, and midheaven. Midheaven, a little bit wide, but it's all brought in. Saturn equals Mercury, Pluto, and then ascendant equals Mars, Uranus. So immediately I looked at this Aries ingress chart and I thought, ooh, there's some volatility. And for those of you living in other parts of the world, the Uranus equals Saturn, Pluto, and Pluto equals Mars, Saturn, and Saturn equals Mercury, Pluto. That would apply to all of you. The angles would be different. That's the only thing that would change. If you look down here, you see Sun at the Aries point. When it's at 0, 0, it shows up at the bottom. If it was at 0 degree 1 minute, it would show up at top. But look at Mars. Mars was heading to that Aries point during this Aries ingress. Mars was at 27 mutable. Well, guess what? It moved to the Aries point, and shortly after that, on March 27th, here in the United States, we had that very tragic shooting in Nashville. 3 children shot in a school, 3 adults shot. That's a very intense story. And that sort of symbolized the Mars equals Saturn, or Pluto equals Mars, Saturn, Uranus equals Saturn, Pluto. I mean, because there's a lot that goes with that story. It's stirring up some deep issues, and we're not going to go into that here. And I have the exact time for that shooting, and I looked at those midpoints, and I was going to put it on screen, and I thought, no, it's too highly charged an issue, and it's too sensitive. It's too soon. But, you know, I looked at this and I thought, intensity is percolating throughout the world right now. There's a lot going on in Paris. There's a lot going on in Tel Aviv right now, in Israel, a lot of demonstrations. There's some of that in the air. So I would suggest to you, if you hear about these kinds of events, if you want to research this, try to find the exact time of when the event happened, pull up the midpoints, do it for weddings, do it for positive things too, whatever it may happen to be, and feel the midpoint pictures revealing important information. Okay, there's a lot there. You will find repetitive signatures. All right, so to summarize, there are no good or bad midpoints in my opinion. You know, Reinhold I have always said his name wrong, so forgive me. I've always said Reinhold Eberton, but I think it's Eberton if it's pronounced correctly. German astrologer, wrote The Combination of Stellar Influences and first introduced, along with Alfred Witt, the 90-degree midpoint sort. Eberton's interpretations are a bit negative or heavy for me. He leans toward a little bit more fatalism than I'm comfortable with. I respect his work tremendously. I have his book. In fact, I inherited most of Noel Tyl's library after he passed. And I have Noel's very, very old book on from Reinhold Eberton that he has all of his notes in the margins. I value that book deeply. And that's a good start, but they just seem to be a little bit too oriented to negativity for me. I like to open the door to a spectrum of expression existing with all astrological measurements. It could be a positive expression. It might be the shadow or most negative expression. We can't determine that ahead of time because how the chart is lived, how astrological energies are lived, in my mind, is determined by our own individual free will, our motivation, our level of involvement. We have a hand in shaping how we live our chart. However, to end this, I would say once you start to use midpoint pictures mindfully and purposefully, not too many, not overloading your measurement structure, but you may find that it's not nearly as complicated as you originally thought. And you may find it rounds out the edges and provides nuance and provides detail. And you will become very good at synthesizing compounded synthesis of 3 planets together and putting them into a structure. So there we go. We are, let's see, let me check my time. Whew, I did it. At the end, I thank you guys so much for listening and hanging in there. Again, take a deep breath, try to digest this, go back and look at the recording if I went too fast. Okay, so I see Lori is on screen. Hi, Lori.
Hello. Do you see all the hearts and the thumbs up and the hands clapping?
Oh, I see some little hearts traveling. Thank you all. I
Yes.
appreciate that very much.
I love this Zoom thing that they have that because we're all over the world, right? We're all in our rooms. We're not together. So you don't hear the clapping. And so this is like the way that we do it online now. So thank you.
I love that. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. And I wanted to tell you that when you were talking about Noel Tyl, you had a whole bunch of hearts floating up there at that time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't choke when I talked about him. I almost did because sometimes his spirit still comes to me. We were very close friends.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So we have lots of questions. We probably won't be able to get through all of them. And I've taken out any questions that are related to a personal chart. And it's just because we just don't have enough time to get to all those questions. So I'm going to start feeding you some questions if you're ready, Kathy.
I'm ready.
All right. When 2 planets are conjunct, would their midpoint be less relevant, or how do you look at a midpoint?
Absolutely, it would be less relevant because those 2 planets are already connected. You don't need to look at the midpoint.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Do you use midpoints with transits or solar return charts or anything like that?
Yes, good question. That was one of the things I had to cut. Midpoints are responsive to solar arcs. In particular, I use solar arcs rather than secondary progressions. It's just my personal choice. But they are responsive to contact from solar arc positions and some outer planet transits. That is a separate lecture. I would love to do a part 2 or a series of classes to explore that because that does take a little bit of explanation. Not the quicker transits, but the more, the outer planet transits contacting or solar arcs. However, I want to really explain. You have to determine, do you need to see that in order to get the information? 9 out of 10 times, the information that I need that is most relevant for the client is going to be right there. I can see it in 5 seconds. I can do a chart cold. I mean, that may draw some criticism, but I can. I've done enough of them. I've done it for 40 years full time. I do client consultations 7 days a week, sometimes 6, because I really do need a day off now and then. So do you need to look at transits to midpoints or arcs? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. For sure, the sun moon midpoint, you'll want to keep that in mind. Okay, long answer to a short question, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to read this word for word. If the focal planet has one of the midpoint planets conjunct the focal planet, will there be a different or more important meaning?
I'm not sure I fully understand that, but let me say this. Again, if there are 2 planets conjunct in the natal chart, or 3 conjunct, you don't need to look for a midpoint, unless there is a midpoint square or opposite that those planets that are conjoined. So if you have planets right here conjoined, and then there's a midpoint square or opposite, then yes, they are linked, but you don't need to find the midpoint of those planets conjunct. I hope that makes sense. That's as clear as I think I can explain it.
Okay, and I think that might answer this next question, or it's similar, about with so many types of natal aspects in astrology, how often do charts have notable midpoint pictures without those planets being an aspect?
Interestingly, I don't even look at trines and sextiles really in the natal charts anymore. I mean, I don't give them weight. I look at conjunct, square, and opposite mainly. I can determine life purpose themes and main structures, life purpose structures in the horoscope from conjunction, squares, and oppositions. Makes it super fast. I mean, I will use other aspects occasionally, but the grit of the chart, I think, comes through those building block conjunct, square, opposite. So there are times when a key midpoint comes in that flushes the picture out. There are times that happens, and that comes through experience. What I recommend everybody starts with now is, if midpoints are new to you, get the language, get the instantaneous synthesis, get those grooves, those synapses in your brain, get those grooves deeply embedded, so that when you see midpoint combinations, you can feel the essence. You are compounding synthesis. So practice, 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 practice. Then you will develop the wisdom for when it's important to see a midpoint picture and when it's just the excuse to measure. Astrologers love to measure. I go in with a big astrological machete when I'm working with students, and I take that machete and go, cut this, 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 and this out. I did not need to hear 40 midpoint pictures. Tell me the 1 or 2 most obvious, most important ones. And I edit, and they come back and they go, oh, it's this one and this one. And I go, exactly. Because it echoed and reinforced the theme that was already in motion. That takes experience. And it really goes back again to our astrological brain, how we love to measure. There's a big difference between the researcher or the astrologer who just likes to think it and the astrologer who applies it. Now, this is not a criticism, but there is a difference. If you apply it in consultation to clients, you have to be efficient, and you have to know what has the loudest voice, the most potential, the loudest signature. That comes through experience. So in this short lecture, I think that's all I can say about that.
Yeah, and there's a number of people asking about, like houses or house cusp being midpoint, or do you use Chiron and asteroids and all that?
Yeah.
So I think that you're kind of addressing.
Yeah, let me address that. You notice in my charts, I don't think I included Chiron in some of them. I can't remember if I included Chiron. I do include Chiron when I do a natal chart interpretation or a consultation for a client. But limit what you measure. You do not need to, you want to pay attention to the angles, ascendant, descendant, midheaven, IC. I think they are very important parts of the horoscope. I wouldn't worry about house cusps. I also would not worry or be concerned about in which house you find a midpoint. You don't need to. You don't need to. Go as simple as you can. Get the clearest, most dominating statement. There is an addiction to measurement in astrology. It really is, like Measurement Anonymous. We should have a group. It's like, I can't stop measuring, piling on more and more and more and more and more. That's just my view. The busy Mercury mind. Go for the essence, go for simplicity, go for what's loudest, go for what's exact. If you start with this, look at your own 90-degree midpoint sort, find midpoint pictures where the focal point is exact the midpoint. Start there. That will limit how many you are looking at. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I think that answers this question about out of mode, using the 90-degree. If you have something that's coming close, but it's out of mode, do you look at that?
If it's within 2 degrees or less. Now, I guarantee you, there's that temptation. Oh, it's only 2 degrees, 45 minutes. Come on. Oh, it's only 4 degrees. Come on. I really want this picture because that's one I like. I want to see it. I want to interpret. And I'm not making fun of astrologers. I mean, I did that too. And I had to learn to be efficient and structured. And I had to learn what was important. And I had to resist that temptation because I make my living from astrology. I don't have the luxury. I see multiple clients every single day. I have to be efficient in my preparation. I have trained my brain and my eye to know what is loudest and most important. And if I don't do that, guess what? I don't pay my mortgage. I don't get to eat. I don't get to pay my life insurance, so there you go. That's my answer to that.
Thank you. With the Aries point, do you differentiate the cardinal point connected to it, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn?
Nope.
Okay.
Not right now, not for midpoints, Recently, I did, if you are an ESAR member, what was it, about a month ago? I did a lecture on the Aries point. So if you're an ESAR member for ESAR Star Club, you can find that. It's recorded. It's free for you. And I talked about the power of the Aries point in natal analysis. It is an amazing brushstroke to add, but for midpoints, don't worry about the sign. Just know a midpoint at the Aries point has very high public projection. It is how you will be seen or how you want to be seen. It's a high visibility part of you, but it's a brushstroke. Take the whole chart into context, add that as a brushstroke. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay, just a couple more questions. Do you find that the focal point in a sun-moon picture serves the natives' wellness, or does it only serve their projects, accomplishments, care of others, externally focused things?
I would say it a little differently. I would say it like this. A midpoint picture involving the sun-moon keys you very much to the frequency of that planet. So if you've ever had a tuning fork, different tuning forks are keyed to different notes in the scale. And if you play it, you're going to hear that note and the frequency flows through the sound waves. Well, it's very similar in astrology. If you have a midpoint picture in your natal chart, Saturn equals sun moon, like Fred Rogers did, you are keyed to the frequency of Saturn. Saturn becomes very strong despite the rest of the chart. Fred Rogers had sun and moon in Pisces. He was a gentle soul. He was a spiritual soul, but yet he was also keyed to the frequency of Saturn and the patience and the foundation. So that's how I would look at it. Now he gets to decide how he uses it. Just like I get to decide how I use Neptune equals sun moon. Do I go into addiction? Do I go into fantasy land, woo-woo land? Do I have ego wipe out? Or do I use it in other ways like meditation, spirituality, intuitive development, or art? I get to decide how I use that. So I can't say whether it's for your wellness or not, because you get to choose how you express and live your chart, in my opinion, anyway.
Thank you. Someone was asking about writing the formula. Does it matter which you put first slash
Yes.
second?
Generally, you put the further out the planet is in the zodiac will go last. So if you're talking about the midpoint between Pluto and Mercury, you would write that midpoint Mercury Pluto, because Pluto is a heavier weight outer planet. Okay. You would put the angle last. Like if you're talking about the midpoint, the halfway point between Saturn and the ascendant, that would be written Saturn ascendant rather than ascendant Saturn. Generally speaking, you can find this as you look on your own computer program. By the way, Don McBroom's book, which is out of print, sadly, somebody did scan it, and it is available for free online. I'm kind of unhappy about that. That seems wrong to me, but it is there. Now, you can download it, but I'm not comfortable downloading something like that, a file on the internet, because I never know if it's a clean file. However, you can find that book used, they're price gouging, or you can look online and see it for free. And like I said, I'm trying to get it republished. And you can look on there for how all the midpoints are noted to answer that question. Okay.
Okay. And I think this will be the last one, because there's just so many. Do you personally find the 45-degree sort to work well too?
I know a lot of astrologers who love the 45-degree sort. Love it, love it, love it. If you are new to midpoints, I would recommend starting with the 90-degree. Later, if you want to go to the 45-degree, you can. I don't resonate with the 45-degree midpoint sort. That's not a criticism of it. My belief as a consulting astrologer is you will find techniques that you resonate with. It's like sliding into it and go, yeah, this is like my favorite sweatshirt. It's comfortable. I like it. Ooh, I feel good. I love this fabric. I have techniques like that, like solar arcs. Solar arcs are like wearing my favorite sweatshirt. 90-degree midpoint sort. It's comfortable. My brain works well with conjunct, square, and opposite. I get maximum information from it. You will find those. So it's your choice. But if you're new to midpoints, go for the simpler version right now and get good at it. Then move to 45-degree if you want. It's my recommendation.
Okay. Well, there have been a number of requests for more, which is good news for Kathy and for Kepler. So duly noted. I will definitely take that back to our group that decides on what courses we're going to offer. And I'll definitely be talking to Kathy about maybe doing a part 2 webinar for y'all. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, Kathy. This was really just wonderful. Great information. Lots of hearts again. We will have the replay posted on YouTube probably later this week. And once it's posted, I will send a link out in the email newsletter. And if there's any other questions, comments, feel free to email me. I'm the one who sends the newsletter. So if you hit reply, it's coming to me. So you're welcome to do that. And that's it. We're going to wrap up for today. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And we'll see you at the next webinar.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for attending.